first camera was a Canon XSI, and I actually got that because I got into hiking when I was kind of in my late teens, and I found all these cool stuff like mines and old farming equipment way off into the Nevada desert, and I wanted to start documenting what I found. So I ended up with, my parents got me a Canon XSI, and this kind of started my whole path into photojournalism. Well, so when I started doing photojournalism specifically was probably about 10 years ago, and basically I had a book on like the 100 most influential photographs of the 20th century. So, and I realized, because I'd always thought I might go into the military, and then I realized like, oh wait, someone took these photos that I'm looking at, like the Vietnam War and World War II, and like these really iconic moments through history, and I realized, wait a minute, there was a photographer there, and that's when I kind of like looked up, like that's when I first started looking into who were these photographers, and then I went, oh my god, photojournalism is like a specific thing, and I haven't stopped pursuing it since then. Photojournalism is my main goal. It's definitely my specialty and the thing I spend the most amount of time on. I really don't do a ton of photography outside of it, but what I try to do with photojournalism is sometimes I occasionally push the boundary of what photojournalism is classically known as. So for instance, for the Reno Rodeo, they were celebrating their 100th year. And to document that, I took a lens from a 1938 Kodak vest pocket and converted it to work on my Canon DSLRs, and I photographed 5 days of the Reno Rodeo with an 89-year-old baffled lens. And it was an extremely successful project, very luckily, but there definitely was some feedback on like, well, is this photojournalism? Is this not? But I think that photojournalism does not have to be a pure documentation of things with no artistic expression. So I guess one of my goals is to bring in outside photography to photojournalism, bring in panoramics to photojournalism, bring in the abstract sometimes, and let that represent what's happening. I have attended university and taken multiple photography classes, and I instructed a few of them. But most of it is, even now I'm carrying a camera, and I've carried a camera on me for 10 years now, and I'm basically never not photographing. And really that's the advice I would give if anybody's looking at classes, is take your classes, but if you don't have your camera with you, you're not taking images. I carry kind of a classic photojournalism camera bag, which is 2 bodies, both with battery extenders to give me the vertical grip, 17-40 Canon f4, a 70-200 Canon f2.8. I actually carry that Kodak 1938 vest pocket as well, a flash, and that is it.
Cool.
I have 2 at the moment. It kind of changes year by year. Currently, one that is one of my favorites was taken during the Reno riots, and it's a protester fleeing tear gas, and all you can see is his legs getting out of the frame, and in the background you can kind of see the chaos down by City Hall. The other one that's probably my favorite, but it's in contention at the moment, is I took a photo at the Reno Rodeo looking down at the chutes. The chutes are where the bulls and the Broncos have their rider mounted. And I took a photo from above at sunset as the horse just happened to go out of the gate in the perfect timing. And I think that one's my favorite. It got picked up by National Geographic Your Shot and featured online. And really, it's one of the photos where I've never had so many things come together all at once to create a single image. So that one's probably my favorite.
Awesome.
My favorite photo by far is, I believe it was by Verson, and it's used to reference the critical moment. It was of the 1930s, I believe, flood in Paris, and it's of the man stepping out onto a plank to try to stay out of the water. I loved that image so much, I've replicated it multiple times during riots I've been to of people stepping out trying to avoid water, and it's definitely something that influenced me so much I almost constantly look for it when I'm out and about.
Cool.
My inspiration is, sometimes I don't think I have inspiration. I have a drive to be at things that are important, that will be relevant in years to come, and I want to be there to document it. I want to be there to show what happened and to let people know what's happening around them, even if they can't attend themselves. Recently the Reno riots happened, or the Reno protest, where protesters entered City Hall, and I was very, in a way, honored to be there, because the photographers that were there on that day is still something people will talk to, I believe that's an incident people will talk about in 30 years, and hopefully my images will live on and be referenced in historical context. I am probably one of the few photographers I know that likes being in front of a camera as much as I like being behind it. I don't tend to take cell phone selfies. I tend to do it with my big DSLR, holding it out at arm's length and getting a photo, or during big riots and stuff, photographers will often hand each other their cameras so that they get a little documentation of themselves being at events. So I think that the selfie is great. But I would say put a little art into it. Social media, especially as a photojournalism, is a very risky place to be. It is a very deep pit of poison that can be, I've had multiple death threats. I've had my bosses calling me at 6 in the morning going, hey, I don't know if you know what's going on, but we told the cops. So I tend to distance myself from social media in a lot of ways. However, I would say using social media in a way to stay in contact with your friends and those around you is an incredibly valuable element of social media. And I would say if somebody's harassing you, just block them. There's none of this like everyone needs to be included on your feed stuff. If you're being traumatized or harassed, or even if it's just somebody bugging you, block them.
That's great advice.
I do not have a favorite camera. I use Canons, and I went with the 7D Mark II as they're basically built like tanks. But believe me, I will use whatever tool I can get to do the job. I don't have a particular photographer that I follow, but what I tend to do is go through, there's lots of websites that post the weekend images. And I'll go through those and find a few images that really speak to me, and I'll look at those, and it's very easy to talk about what makes an image bad. I don't think there's enough time spent on talking about what makes an image good. So when I find an image that really speaks to me, I'll sit down and look at it and go, what about this image is appealing? What elements of it drew me to this image out of all the others? And that's kind of how I learned different framing and different exposure. Like, that's a way of learning the tools without, I think, ending up copying someone. Because that's always the thing I've been worried about following a photographer specifically, is that you might end up in the replication more than inspiration. My goal as a photojournalist really is to, one day I'd love to work for AP or Reuters or something along those lines, where you go to an event, photograph it, submit photos, and then it's really up to the market whether or not you end up on ABC or CNN or MSNBC. But for the time being, I've really found a home here in Reno with thisisreno.com, who gave me a chance, and we've really been doing some pretty powerful work, I think. Future of photography. I think right now we are in a bit of a haze because we're not seeing a lot of jobs for photographers, but we're seeing more images now than we've ever seen in human history. And I think what we're stuck with right now is everyone's trying to figure out how to make that financially possible. I really think there's a bright future we may just not be seeing yet, because we live in a world of more and more images think we just need to learn how to monetize it still.
Sure.
There's been a great deal of discussion recently about blurring the faces of protesters, especially in Black Lives Matter, and I have been not very vocal, but I'm very against blurring faces. The reason for this is I cover everything. I go to Black Lives Matter protests just as much as I go to the Open Nevada protests, just as much as I go to Trump protests or Trump rallies or anti-Trump stuff. And I don't blur their faces, and that's the way it's equal. If I start blurring protests at a Black Lives Matter rally and not at a Trump rally, then I'm introducing bias into the news. And believe me, it's very emotional to me because I have seen a couple of images from me and my fellow photojournalists up on the internet with people trying to hunt other people down. And that disgusts me, and it does make me want to not take pictures of people's faces. But it's not the truth then. And like I said, if we're doing it for one group and not the other, it's introducing bias, and that's not a place photojournalists can go. So I know it's tough, and believe me, I get threats from it. I know how hard it is, but I really believe that as a photojournalist, it's your responsibility to document what's happening around you the same way you document everything else. I guess the most important thing for ethics in photojournalism is you need to have ethics built into yourself. If you feel like you're someone that needs to look into a pamphlet to figure out what's ethical, I really think you might need to spend some time with Interflection about whether photojournalism might be the correct career for you. You're going to have to make very hard decisions in photojournalism. I chose recently in the Reno riots, one of my writers was brutally attacked by protesters. And I don't have any photos of that because I charged in, grabbed him, and we tried to flee, and that's when the tear gas went off and saved us. That's not a decision I made. I just saw what was happening and went for it, and I think ethically that's what you're going to end up doing as a photojournalist, because things are going to happen so fast, even outside of conflict. Even if you're working what seems like an easy, nice story, you're still going to have to make these snap decisions. And I really think the only way you can get to the point where you can make ethical decisions in a third of a second is practice and self-reflection. I think what I would say is I am a photojournalist that my main drive is to go to things like the Reno riot. I was in Bangkok in 2013 when they overthrew their government. I photographed Antifa in Spain and farmers' protests in Warsaw. You do not have to be a conflict photojournalist to be a photojournalist. There is some amazing work that does not put you in the front line of being shot at by police officers or beaten up by protesters. Go to Fallon, Nevada and document one of the smallest dairies out there is trying their hardest, and they gave away free milk during the coronavirus shutdown. That's an amazing story. You can be a photojournalist without being endangered all the time. And I would really encourage people that maybe don't see themselves as photojournalists. If you're a storyteller, you still have a place in photojournalism, really without going to war.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What I would say is that I'm really lost. Sorry, I got off track. I know, this one's the hard, I think about this a lot, but I don't have an answer.
Yeah. That's
okay.
All right,